Hi and welcome to this video. I'm going to show you how you can use flows to update your JIRA issues when an update to a vulnerability happens in AttackForge. Flows is a new module which is purpose-built for automations and integrations. This example we're going to run through in this video is available on our support site, so you can also follow along and read through all of the example scripting that we're going to use as well. So let's start by checking out the flow in action. So here on our project in AttackForge, if we open up and take a look at an existing vulnerability, we'll see this one already has a JIRA issue key, meaning that it's already been exported to JIRA. So if we come into this vulnerability and then make a change to it, we want to get that information into JIRA itself. And here we can see that this is the corresponding JIRA issue that we've previously created. So in AttackForge, we're going to click on Edit, and we're simply just going to change the write-up associated with this particular vulnerability. So let's just search for something else in the library, and here we'll see the information for the descriptions and attack scenarios and recommendations is going to be changing. So let's go in and save this vulnerability. And now if we pop over to JIRA, we can see that it's already been updated. So we can see the unrestricted upload issue is now already here with all of the corresponding information as well. So let's take a deeper look into how that actually happened. So within the flows module in AttackForge, now if you have access to it, it will show within the integrations section within your main menu. I have an example here called update JIRA issue. Now the code that we're going to be looking at is available on the support site, and you can separately from the AttackForge GitHub repository open up the JIRA folder, and you'll see an example here for update JIRA issue flow. So you can take this example in this video and download this flow and import it into your own AttackForge as well. It's going to help to speed up the process and have a sort of a baseline that you can adjust for your own needs. So let's come back and take a look at the flow. So here we can see there was a run of this flow that happened just now, and that's the update that we just sent to JIRA to update for the vulnerability. So there's two steps that are happening, or two actions that are happening in this flow. The first one is to get the JIRA issue, and the second one is to update the JIRA issue. Now the reason we're fetching the JIRA issue is really just to make sure that the key that is associated here in AttackForge is still available for a relevant or non-deleted JIRA issue. So, otherwise if we try to update it directly, there's potential there that could already be deleted, and it could create an error there. So what we want to do is make sure that we have access to that issue. So we're going to retrieve it and make sure that it still exists. So here we can see the input into this action was the updated vulnerability data. Now we are relying on the vulnerability updated event. So because this flow is associated to my user, and because I have access to this vulnerability, where this flows can then trigger, and when I made that change to select a new write-up, and that has now executed a run of this flow. So here the input is the information about that vulnerability. The output here as well, we can see that we want to pass into the next stage is also contains the vulnerability data as well. So we're going to need to use that to tell JIRA what the updates were. But separately, we also need to also pass the JIRA issue key as well. So if we open up the HTTP tab, we'll see what had happened when this flow had executed. We can see the URL for the JIRA issue that it tried to retrieve that information from. We can also see the headers that were sent as well. And we can see the response that came back from JIRA. So we can see the headers that the JIRA server returned and the response body. And importantly, we can see that when we try to get this JIRA issue, we can see all that information came back successfully. And importantly, the key is there to confirm. So we can match that with what we have and verify that we have access to the JIRA issue, and we should hopefully be able to update it as well. The logging's there to help you with debugging as you're building and testing your flows. You can use AFScript's own logging features, and for that, again, we recommend to take a look at the AFScript page before you start building any flows in AttackForge. So let's take a look at how this flow's configured. So we're going to edit the flow. And again, we'll see here that the flow has a name, but also importantly, it's configured to run when a vulnerability is updated. Now, the first action, we've given that a label of get JIRA issue, and because we don't know what the URL for the JIRA issue is, or I should say, we don't know what the JIRA issue key is ahead of time. We need to do that dynamically in our request script. So I'm going to show you how we can configure the URL within the script itself. But we do know it's going to be a GET request because that is what the JIRA API is going to use when we look at GET issue. So this is the API that we're trying to access to retrieve that information directly. And you can access this from developer.atlassian.com, or you can go into Google and type in JIRA REST API, and it'll be one of the first few links. So the JIRA API does require us to have some particular headers, one being the content type, and that has to be set to application JSON. And we've also set the accept header also to application JSON. Separately here we have the authorization. So this is the JIRA authorization token or credentials, and we've set that up to be a secret. Now AttackForge does have secrets, and in this case, all we need for this flow is just the credentials to tell JIRA to update and to fetch the issue and update it as well. So let's take a look at the request script. Now, the key part that we're looking for is the JIRA issue key. And because the JIRA issue key in AttackForge is configured as a custom field, we have to go through the custom fields to find that information. Now, in this example, what I've done, I've created within my vulnerability fields configuration, I've created a section for integrations, and we'll see there's a field here called JIRA issue key. And this is the particular key name in AttackForge that we're looking for. So this is what we're going to use in our script to pull out the correct custom field, so we know what the JIRA issue keys that's associated to this vulnerability. So that's what we're looking for as part of this this step here. And if we can't find it, then we want to finish our flow because at this point there's no JIRA issue key, so there's no further need to try and retrieve or update anything in JIRA. However, if we did find the JIRA issue key, then what we want to do is pass to the next action in the flow the data about this vulnerability. So here we can see on the right hand side, this is some test data that because we're setting up a flow, this is not any particular data with any particular vulnerability. But here we can see that data will contain all of the vulnerability data information when this flow executes. Because we're going to need that in the next action in this flow, which is to provide this information to JIRA, we want to pass that in the response data. And in this case, we're just giving it a name called vuln, so we can access it through data.vuln in the next step. But separately here, we also now can build up the URL. So we know what the JIRA tenant is ahead of time. We know what the endpoint is. And what we didn't know before was the JIRA issue key. And now that we've already extracted that information from the vulnerability, we can then add that to the URL that we have here. And that's going to be used to then make that request to JIRA. Now, when the response comes back from JIRA, we can have some error handling here. So what we're doing is just checking whether the response itself had the right headers coming back. So we're looking here in this example for content type, making sure that it's the right type of response that we can read from. The response object itself, here's an example. So when the server responds to a request that AFScript has made, Flows has made in AttackForge, we can see what the status code is, access the headers, and also access the body as well. What we're looking for is body.key. So we're expecting when we try to get an issue, there's going to be a key according to JIRA's documentation that we are hoping to get back. And that's exactly what we're looking for here. So provided that we have that information, then what we want to do is continue to pass on the vulnerability data to the next action in the flow, but we also want to give it the JIRA issue key. And we're going to read that directly from that response coming back from JIRA. So now we have all that information about the vulnerability and also the JIRA issue key. And we know that we have at least ability to read that issue. So hopefully it's one that's existing in JIRA. So now what we can do is make a request to update the issue in JIRA with the changed vulnerability data. So that's going to be a put request. Again, we're using JIRA's own REST API documentation, and the endpoint we're looking at here is edit issue, and we can see what it's expecting as a payload. So we're going to use that in AttackForge to build out a body that we're going to send that matches the information we need. So here we don't know what the URL is. Again, as we're defining the flow, this is all going to be known when the flow executes. So for that reason, again, we'll construct the URL in the request script. But what we do know is that JIRA expects, again, the content type except header, similar to the first step, as well as the authorization header as well. So in this request script, firstly, what we're doing is checking to make sure that we have the JIRA issue key, and if not, something's gone wrong. So we're going to wrap up the flow here. And similar, also check that we've passed the vulnerability data in, because we're going to need to work with that. So assuming that's all there, we can then start configuring the URL. And again, we know now that the JIRA issue, what the JIRA issue key is, so we can then set that up and put that into our URL here as well. But importantly, the body that we're going to submit to JIRA, we've created a function to build that body up. So going through that body, what we can see is that it starts with defining a summary. Now, summary in the JIRA sense is the really the title of the issue that we're creating. So because the vulnerability has changed, in this case, we changed write-ups, so the title of the vulnerabilities changed, so we need to make sure JIRA's aware of that change itself. So here we're going through and setting up a field to capture that information. You'll notice that there are some sort of a markup language that's happening as we're building out some of these JIRA fields. So JIRA does have its own language for styling all of the information. So if you're not aware of that and you're building an integration for JIRA, do go to JIRA's documentation and just make sure you're familiar with how all that works. But what we can see here is we're building up now the description, and the description is going to have all that key information about this vulnerability. So what we want to do is get all the information that we would like to use. In this case, the CVSS scores. So what we're doing here is going through the tags of this vulnerability, extracting the CVSS scores, and then using that information to put it back into our description itself. Now, because vulnerabilities can have all different types of configuration and fields, there's all, it's different logic to handle different cases. For example, if there's, just making sure that, the attack scenario might be there, and, separately likelihood of exploitation. And as well here, we're extracting the POC, or the steps to reproduce. If there's any notes on the vulnerability, we may also want that to show, so we can go through and add that in as well. And towards the bottom here, we can see the recommendations for remediating this vulnerability, and we definitely want to get that into the JIRA issue. We also have some tags. So from the JIRA side, they refer to it as labels. So we can map the AttackForge tags to the JIRA labels. Again, you have freedom to do what you want, but in this example, that's what we've done. And here we can see the mapping of the AttackForge vulnerability rating or vulnerability priority to the JIRA issue rating. Now JIRA by default has highest, high, medium, low, lowest, which we've used to map critical, high, medium, low, and informational. However, your JIRA project may have a completely different setup, so again, make sure you've checked that on your JIRA project. The response here, or the return, is a set of fields which will contain a summary, description, priority, the issue type. Again, I've set it to be a bug, but again, JIRA has epics and stories and all different other types there that you might want to use. So again, that's all configurable. So make sure you set that based on the needs of your JIRA project. And similar here with the labels as well. So once this request has been sent to JIRA, the response will come back and we can handle that response. What we're looking for from that API is really a response code that comes back with a 200 or 204. In this particular example, I'm testing for a 204 because that seems to be what has been coming back through all the testing we've done. And if that's the case, we can then wrap up the flow and tell it to finish. Otherwise, if it does come back with an error, we can log that information out and make sure we can see that when we look at the run history later on as well. So that's all there really is to it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.